the state of Ohio has signaled that they want to permanently remove the 16 children that were found in filth and squalor in that little Vinton County home down in Hamden, Ohio, that that ended in 16 counts, felony counts, against 4 different people. The children's reported mother, Elizabeth, reported father, Gary 2, we're going to call him, and grandparents, Christina and Gary 1. And in all the conversations that I've had about this, I've kind of just assumed that the state was like, yeah, we're gonna take them out of there, and then we're going to figure out what the best thing is. And I thought that it would take a little bit longer to figure out what the best thing is, but the signal that we're getting is that Ohio is like, nah.
They found 16 children inside that house. 16, ranging from just 18 months old to 18 years. Some of them couldn't walk. Some couldn't speak in full sentences. They were covered in filth, living in squalor, and the sheriff who walked through that door said it was the worst he'd ever seen.
June 30th, police in Vinton County, Ohio, southeastern Ohio, headed over to the home of Gary Siders, the old second. Some refer to him as Junior. I just call him G2. They were there, we found out, to serve a warrant for 4 counts of indecent exposure. While there, they found the squalid conditions inside this home, and they found 16 children living in these conditions, ranging from 18 months to 18 years. But even the 18-year-old was described as developmentally challenged, I guess is probably, I mean, that's me paraphrasing, but there were learning disabilities, there were developmental issues. They were also described, many of them, as needing hospital care. Some of them were airlifted. The Attorney General of the state of Ohio, a guy named Andy Wilson, in a press conference, described the children as feral. The Vinton County Sheriff, Ryan Kane, described the conditions as the worst he's ever seen. Now,
and you already know what I'm about to say. The state swept in, took custody, and now they're telling us it's permanent. Permanent custody. They're not even pretending this is temporary anymore. $1 million? That's the price tag they slapped on this tragedy before most of us even heard the children's names. And look, I need you to stay with me here because the numbers are going to make your stomach turn. Ohio's controlling board approved $1 million in emergency funding on July 13th. That's real. You can pull the document yourself. It says placement costs alone are projected at $150 to $250 per child per day. Do the math. For 16 kids, that's an annual hit of over $150,000 just to house them. They call it supplemental children's services. I call it a ballooning cost that nobody wants to audit, because when money moves that fast and that quietly, we all know something else is at play. Not an accident at all. Now here's where it gets interesting. The very next day, July 14th, Vinton County prosecutor Bill Archer went before the county commissioners and asked for another $20,000.
Okay, let me start off going over to Acrobat to an article from the 23rd, so 5 days ago. And I remember reading this article and sharing it with you then, but I just didn't pick up on things. So I want to revisit it. This from WOUB. Vinton County prosecutor asks county commissioners for more money to help in the Siders case. Now, remember, when we're talking about asking for money, we're actually talking about 2 different things in terms of our conversation today. Number 1 is money to help care for the children, and number 2 is money to help prosecute the Siders adults. And this article actually talks a little bit about both, but when the Vinton County prosecutor is asking for money, he's asking for county funds to help prosecute the case. Okay? But there's more in the article. Okay. The Vinton County Prosecutor's Office asked the county commissioners for additional money to help with the cost of the Siders case. Prosecutor William Archer, I'll bring up his photo right here, Bill Archer, asked for additional money at a July 14th commissioners meeting. Archer has been prosecuting the child endangerment case against Gary Siders Jr., Gary Siders Sr., Elizabeth Siders, and Christina Siders. The four are charged with 16 counts of, let's call it CE, with Gary Jr. separately casing, I'm trying to pour water and read at the same time, with Gary Jr. separately facing 4 counts of public indecency. The four are accused of keeping 16 kids in conditions that authorities have described as horrific. Archer asked for an additional $20,000 to aid his office in the prosecution, and because children's services would be an additional burden to the county. Well, that's interesting. I don't understand how Archer would be asking for more money outside of the purview of his prosecution, unless children's services are within his prosecution, right? If they're doing interviews for him or for his office or consulting or something like that. Okay. And I learned a little bit about Children Protective Services in the state of Ohio that we're going to get into. Okay, Archer said the 16 children are part of a juvenile court case where the state is seeking to take permanent custody.
Not for the kids. For the prosecution, he told them the state is already moving to terminate parental rights forever. He said, actually, let me rephrase that. He said Ohio is seeking permanent custody on behalf of the county. That little phrase matters. It means the county, through its Children's Services Agency, isn't just babysitting until a hearing. They want to erase every legal tie those parents ever had.
It appears, at least from what was reported in the commissioners' meeting from Vinton County Prosecutor Bill Archer, is that it changed between July 13th when they requested this $1 million and July 14th. And we have to just, I guess we should put our skeptical hat on. Maybe Bill Archer doesn't know if it's permanent or not, but I kind of feel like he would be in a position to know that there would be a change between the 13th and 14th. On the 13th, they're like temporary custody. On the 14th, Bill Archer is like permanent custody. So, and then I looked up.
No more rights, no more obligations, no more second chances. And once that happens, those 16 kids become property of the system. You know, just like I know that a system hungry for funding doesn't easily let go of its inventory. But before I get to that, I need you to see who the real hero in this story might be. And you won't hear his name from the Attorney General, the talking heads, the 18-year-old, the oldest child in that home, described in court documents as developmentally challenged, treated legally as a juvenile despite his age, while the adults around him were collapsing into whatever private hell they created. That young man was likely the one soothing the toddlers, sharing his food, holding little hands in the dark. He's the silenced hero nobody will interview. And now the state wants to legally erase him from his own siblings' lives too, because permanent custody means they can adopt those children out. They can split them into groups, scatter them across foster homes that max out at 6 kids per house. Like Nana of 16 reminded us from Pennsylvania's own rules. 16 kids don't fit, so they get divided.
I don't think they can find anybody in the greater Siders family that they feel comfortable placing a child or the children. Which kind of says something, right? So in my notes, like Ohio rules prioritize these family placements, right? They must explore placement with relatives first, including non-custodial parent if appropriate. If no suitable relative is available, agencies look for suitable non-relatives with an established relationship. That's number 2. And then the state standard is the least restrictive, most family-like safe setting that meets the child's needs. So if they can find a custodial, a relative that have the ability to do it, then that's where they go first. If they can't, then they go to non-relatives that have a relationship. If they can't do that, then they go to non-relatives without a relationship. But they're looking for the least restrictive, most family-like safe setting that meets the child's needs, right? So where can the children be placed? They can be placed in relatives' homes, suitable non-relative homes, foster homes, or treatment foster homes. That's the ideal. Short-term settings, if they can't find the ideal, are emergency shelters or other temporary approved suitable care settings. They also look at group homes, children's residential centers, medical or educational facilities. And then when they get permanent custody, adoptive placement is treated as the least restrictive setting once permanent custody is granted. So once permanent custody is granted to the state, they're looking for adoptive placement at that point. They're not looking for foster homes. They're looking for adoptive homes. And I think that that's going to be challenging. Especially, I mean, you got 16 kids, and we were talking about this with Elizabeth Jones the other day, right? You would have to have, in order to take on 16 kids, you would have to have room for 16 children. Who has room for that? Very few. It's like the top 1% of 1% would even have the room, the space requirements to take on 16 foster or adoptive children. Vast majority of people would not be able to do that. So what does that imply to me? It implies to me a division of the children, which, I don't know, for me would be super sad. If I'm a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid and I have these younger siblings that I probably feel almost like a nurturing parental love for, and they're split up, I just can't imagine the pain that causes. And then the inverse is also true.
And the one who held them together becomes just another file in a caseworker's drawer.
The little ones that depend on, I don't think that they could depend on any of the adults in their lives, right? I mean, look at them. I don't think they could depend on them. I think that there were mental health crises going on. There were physical health crises going on. I think that there were substance abuse issues, either alcohol or drugs. There were these people were not equipped to take care of these children. And so I think the younger children probably, this is just my guess, were dependent on the older children. And then if they're split up, then that's like being taken away from the parent who loves you, right? I just both sides of it. And it's not even binary. There's a broad spectrum of feelings that are going to happen here, and that is the misery of it. That is the just the tragedy of this whole thing. Is that it's the kids that suffer because of this. Maybe, I mean, my hope is that the suffering is less so. That it will be a happier situation wherever they are. My fear though is that, like, did you guys see the case that news came out today? I can't pronounce their last name, but it was a family of 6 who had 4 biological children and then 2 adoptive children, and according to police, the father murdered his wife and all 6 of the children before he set his house on fire and put a bullet in himself. Like, the poor kids that they adopted ended up dead, right? So that's my fear in all this. And of course, there are no guarantees for any of this, but oh my goodness. I saw that and I was just like, oh, it made me think of the Siders kids. What if they are rescued from this filthy, disgusting place only to be put in a place where they're in even more danger? It's the idea of it is just frightening.
Let's slow down for a second. I'm going to speak quietly here because this part matters more than any document I've shown you. Imagine being 18 and having never known a day without those younger kids needing you. Imagine your voice is small, your mind works differently, but your heart knows exactly who your family is. Now picture someone in a government office deciding you'll never live with them again, not because you hurt them, because you couldn't save them from a situation you were born into. That's the wound nobody is talking about. That's the part that keeps me up. I'll be honest, this one hits different for me. I can't shake the feeling we're watching something deeply wrong unfold, and the people with the power are asking the wrong questions. They ask how much will it cost, not who will it break. All right, let me pull back up. Breadcrumb time. The agency holding these kids is the South Central Ohio Job and Family Services, a shared agency for a county of just 12,600 souls.
The county asked for $20,000 for the prosecutor. The state has already funded $1 million approved for placement-related costs. Now, I found this document. Let me bring you over to this one. This is from a Department of Children and Youth meeting from the 13th of July. Okay, and this is the actual request for the $1 million to care for these 16 children. There are a couple little details that we find in here. The Ohio Department of Children and Youth, the DCY, respectfully requests the controlling board approval to establish a new fund and line item and to transfer cash and appropriation authority in the amount of $1 million from Fund 5K MO Appropriation Item 911614, Controlling Board Emergency Purpose Contingency Fund, to New Fund 5EB1 Line Item 830626, Vinton County Supplemental Children's Services for Emergency Funds to Vinton County. So it's basically like, hey, Ohio Controlling Board, you control the money. We would like you to reach into your contingency fund, your emergency fund, and transfer over to a new fund, $1 million buckaroos. All right. And then, it's fiscal year 2027, and here's what they're asking for, right? From the CEB to the KID, from 5KMO to 5EB1, from the Controlling Board Emergency Purposes Contingencies to the Vinton County Supplemental Children's Services, $1 million. Brand spanking new. Here's the explanation. Vinton County, home to approximately 12,600 residents, has the 7th lowest median income in Ohio and is currently experiencing an unprecedented child welfare crisis. In a single day, South Central Ohio Job and Family Services. Let's pause there, okay? South Central Ohio Job and Family Services is a shared agency, and this happens in many counties, especially small rural counties. It's a shared agency that is basically an agency that looks after the well-being of children, right? That's part of their purview. And so we're going to look into them just a little bit more here in just a bit, but they are the ones that are handling the 16 Siders children.
Before June 30th, they had fewer than 16 children in temporary custody total. Overnight, their census jumped 55%. They more than doubled their caseload.
Okay, so in a single day, South Central Ohio Job and Family Services, the county's Children Services Agency, took custody of 16 children, a 55% increase in the agency's overall census, and more than doubling the number of children in temporary custody. A 55% increase in the agency's overall census. I don't even know I don't know what that means. But doubling the number of children in temporary custody, I get, right? It's more than doubling. So they had less than 16 in custody in Vinton County. Now they have a little more than double that. Placement costs alone are projected at $150 to $250 per child per day, creating an estimated annual fiscal impact of more than $850,000 for this small community. The situation requires immediate state contingency funding to protect vulnerable children and address needs not covered under current budget planning. The Department of Children and Youth respectfully requests a $1 million emergency allocation to stabilize these essential services.
And suddenly $1 million appears from an emergency fund. The same agency will now manage that money, coordinate placements, and push the court for permanent severance. They told the state they'll track the funds separately and use them exclusively for placement and court actions. But here's the thing, though. The same funding request also mentions supporting police department overtime and preparation for court proceedings.
This is good reporting from a local news agency. So what did we learn? We learned that Ohio is like, we are taking permanent custody of these kids. Now, I did a little research and I have notes up here that I just want to kind of talk about. I'm not going to show you my notes because they are disjointed. I'm going to just do my best to be as organized as I possibly can. Okay. So let me just consult my notes here. Okay, so WOUB, we just reported that the prosecutor told commissioners the state is seeking permanent custody on behalf of the county. That moves the story from emergency removal to a juvenile court fight over the children's long-term and legal care. It's juvenile court, therefore none of that stuff is available online. Most of it is sealed. I think that if I were on the ground in Vinton County, I might be able to get access to some of those documents, but I think it's okay that we don't get into the details of those things just simply out of concern for the privacy and the well-being of the 16 children, right?
So the line between caring for children and prosecuting their parents is already blurry. Your tax dollars are fueling both sides of the same tragic machine. And this is the part nobody talks about. Under Ohio law, permanent custody vests all parental rights in the agency.
This is section 2151.011 of the Ohio Revised Code, specifically talking about juvenile court definitions. I think it's down on page 8. I highlighted it. Yeah, permanent custody. Permanent custody in the state of Ohio means a legal status that vests in a public children's services agency, in this case, the South Central Ohio Job and Family Services Agency, all parental rights, duties, and obligations, including the right to consent to adoption, and it divests the natural parents or adoptive parents of all parental rights, privileges, and obligations, including all residual rights and obligations. So when we're talking permanent, they're like, we are taking from you your children. They are no longer yours. You have no right to them. You have no obligation to them. You have no duty to them. We are taking this on ourselves. Why? Because we have proven to a court of law that y'all can't do it. That's really what it boils down to. And as we take these rights away from you, we assume those rights, and you never get them back. If it's permanent, you never, ever get them back. It's permanent. We could adopt these children out if a court gives us that right. This, by the way, guys, is scary to me, but in extreme circumstances, like the one in which we find ourselves, or that's overstating it, like the one in which the state of Ohio finds themselves, I think that this is probably appropriate.
Including the right to consent to adoption. They don't need mom or dad's signature anymore. They don't even need to ask a relative. The same statute says they have to show that no relative is able to take legal custody.
I think my buddy Elizabeth Jones might disagree with me, and certainly is okay with me if she does. Let's see. The next I wondered what it looked like to request permanent custody, and I found again in the Ohio Revised Code, section 2151.413, motion requesting permanent custody. So this is what happens. A public children's services agency or private child placing agency. Ooh, that's scary to me. That's scary. I don't know. I'm glad this is a public agency. A public children's services agency or private child placing agency that, pursuant to an order of disposition under division of blah, blah, blah of the revised code, that blah, 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 is granted temporary custody of a child who is not abandoned or orphaned, may file a motion in the court that made the disposition of the child requesting permanent custody of the child. Public services agency or private agency pursuant to order under blah, 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 is granted temporary custody, blah, 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 may file a motion in the court that made the disposition of the child requesting permanent custody of the child whenever it can show that no relative of the child is able to take legal custody of the child. That one stood out to me because typically they're looking for next of kin, right? But if we believe what Bill Archer told the county commissioners, within 2 weeks they had already determined we're making this permanent. We can show that there is no relative of this child or these children that is able to take legal custody of the child. Under C, they may file, a public agency pursuant to the order of disposition of blah, 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 places a child in a planned permanent living arrangement, may file a motion in the court that made the disposition of the child requesting permanent custody of the child. There are some exceptions, but basically the main thing for me was
2 weeks. That's all it took for them to decide the entire extended Siders family is unfit. No lengthy investigation. No public hearing that you or I could watch. Juvenile court is sealed. The case file is buried. They're rushing this through while the criminal felony charges against 4 adults are still pending. 4 people facing 16 counts of child endangerment each. Gary Siders also has indecent exposure charges. That's the criminal side. The custody side is a separate, quieter war being fought in a room we can't enter, and they want it that way.
I'm hopeful. Let me see if there was one other. Was there? I kind of yada-yada'd that. Let me just make sure there's. Yeah, okay. So questions that are still kind of looming are the children all together? Are they split into groups? Are they scattered across different placements? How many of them need therapeutic, educational, medical, or some kind of residential support, right? What will the juvenile court require before granting or denying permanent custody? Are they going to require that a felony conviction happen? Or is it enough are the conditions in which they found the children enough? And we won't know one. In fact, we may never know. We may never know what happens here. It's because it's juvenile court.
Everything makes sense now. We've seen this script before. A small, poor county gets overwhelmed by a crisis it can't afford, So the state rides in with $1 million lifeline that just so happens to create a permanent dependency. The agency expands. The foster care contractors get paid. The lawyers bill the county. Meanwhile, 16 children who already learned that adults fail them get shuffled through a system where only 27% of foster kids nationally end up adopted.
Some of the information that I found. Let me kind of skip ahead. Check. Like this comes from the Department of Education from the state of Ohio. Okay. In the 2024-2025 school year, Ohio had 14,455 students in foster care. This is just in the school system. Foster care is defined as a 24-hour substitute care for children placed away from their parents or guardians for whom a custodial agency has placement and care responsibility. A child can be removed from their home and placed into custody of a custodial agency through an official court order or emergency intervention by law enforcement. A custodial agency is a public children's service agency or Title IV juvenile court. A child placed in foster care could live in a foster family home, foster home of relatives, group home, emergency shelter, residential facility, child care institution, or pre-adoptive home. But just in the school system in Ohio, in the 2024-2025 school year, 14,500 students were in foster care. According to Adopt US Kids, there are a little more than 3,300 children waiting to be adopted in the state of Ohio. And national share of foster care exits that were adoptions in 2024, the last data that I found was 27%. So only a quarter of the kids end up in an adoptive home. This is nationally speaking, right? So 3/4 go all the way through the foster system and then are aged out.
The rest age out. The odds are 3-1 against them ever finding a permanent family again.
My only hope in this, it's not my only hope, one of my hopes in this, I have a friend that I recently reconnected with, and his story is not mine to share, so I'll be very vague. But I recently connected with a childhood friend who was raised in a home where he was not taken from his folks, but he was passed around. He had a mom who had struggles, and I knew her and thought she was cool when I was a kid. I loved her to death. I thought she was rad, but they had struggles, and so he was kind of passed around. He was taken away, and he became a father when he was very, very young, and we're 50. He's been a grandfather for a long, long time already. But the thing about when we reconnected, I was like, dude, you are so amazing. You went through this traumatic childhood that was tough, being pulled in one direction or another. In fact, the last I really remember him was when we were 12 or 13. Though he graduated from my same high school, but I never saw him because sometimes he would be taken to another school and then he'd show up at our school and we weren't in the same classes. And then it was just, there was just so much upheaval in his life. But then we reconnect and we're 50 years old and I'm like, dude, against all odds, you are a terrific man and you have a terrific family and you are doing terrifically good things. You are extraordinarily ordinary, which makes you extraordinary, right?
The state calls that protection. I call it a cover story for a ballooning bureaucracy that profits off broken homes. And they tell us this is justice. They tell us we should feel safe because the Attorney General called the children feral in a press conference, painting a picture so extreme that no judge would dare send them back. The defense pushed back.
Defense attorney Tommy Stolley, who is Elizabeth Sider's attorneys said, come on, that has been debunked. They were not feral children. They had social media accounts, for crying out loud, right? So there's some pushback, and we got to remember that this is just what is alleged to have happened, right? This is what law enforcement, prosecution, and politicians are saying happened here, right? But there are two sides to every story. And one of the sides to the story is, I was talking to my buddy Elizabeth Jones from Hillbilly Crime, is, Elizabeth Jones, having been raised in the same, a similar poverty-stricken area, kind of has a different take. She hopes that Elizabeth Siders will be given a second chance.
Elizabeth Siders' attorney said that was debunked. The kids had social media accounts. They weren't raised by wolves. But the damage is done. The narrative is locked. And the same system that couldn't stop the suffering in that house before the raid is now saying, trust us to fix it forever. Just sign the check.
I do want to make one quick little searcheroo while I'm at it, just to see if any other documents came out before we, or after we went live. I checked a little before we went live, and I might as well show you how to do this. This is the Vinton County Court View website. It's if you search Vinton County Common Pleas Court, you will find this. And this is G2, followed by Christina, followed by Elizabeth, followed by G1. And I just like to look at them. Nothing on G2. Christina, nothing new on Christina's case. Elizabeth's case is the one that I keep looking for something, because Mr. Stolley is vigorously defending her in the court of public opinion. Nothing new there. And then in the case of Gary the Elder, looks like nothing new there. So that's where we are on the case. We're going to continue to watch this and look for any new developments.
So here's my question, and I need you to answer it in the comments, because this story is far from over. How much of that $1 million actually reaches those children? Not the administrators, not the court fees, not the overtime line items, the kids, the same kids who were airlifted to hospitals, who probably never had a birthday cake, who are going to wake up tomorrow in a strange bed without the brother who held them together. Is this rescue, or is it a permanent state custody cash grab dressed up in concern? You tell me, because from where I stand, the outrage isn't just about what happened inside that house. It's about what's happening right now in the offices that claim to be the solution. And I don't trust it, not for a second.